faith leaders delivered a message of unity in the wake of the Bondi massacre. This Christmas will be a time of reflection, and for the families of those victims, it's tinged with immense sorrow. Joining me live now on Christmas Eve is Auxiliary Bishop of the Catholic Archdiocese of Sydney, Tony Percy. Thanks so much for your time this Christmas Eve. What is your message to the community, particularly in Sydney? It's just been such an awful last fortnight.
Yeah, excuse me, Trudy. Thank you. It's well, obviously one of great comfort and support for our Jewish brothers and sisters. They've suffered a terrible loss, and it's affected every Australian by the look of it. You can see the outpouring. I think we've got to regroup now as a country and look back at how we started, a free and fair society, and now how we've got to get back on track to make sure that is created. Whether people are people of faith or have different faiths, we've got to get together and chart the course again. I think that's very, very clear.
And how can communities come together after moments of such pain and terror? Certainly anger was one of the emotions too that was pretty raw in the wake of this. What role can faith play in that?
Oh, faith's terribly important. I mean, I go back to those COVID funerals we did for 10 people, and you weren't allowed to touch people. I think one of the most significant things you can do as a community without saying too many words, because really words don't capture what's happened here, and it's very difficult to speak about it. I've been with some rabbis yesterday and some people from the Islamic faith and all sorts of different faith brought together by the New South Wales opposition yesterday. It was a very interesting meeting, and someone made this point that you can't really speak into this sort of problem, but you can show signs of great comfort. And it's at times when we have death and grief, I think that the sense of touch is a very symbolic thing, of a gesture of how we do love one another very much.
And we know that for the families in particular, for those touched by this horror, that Christmas is just going to be such a difficult day tomorrow. And for every Australian who's lost someone this year as well, to not have your loved one around the table. What is that message of Christmas, that time of togetherness? How does that come together for you?
I think it's very important, isn't it? It's a universal thing, Christmas, for many people, even for people that say aren't Christians, and that there's a sense of that, the teaching is that God has entered humanity, is entered as a baby, completely dependent on his mother and father, which is St. Joseph, and they, of course, had to flee the place because of the violence present at that time. So we always seem to have this violence in society, and the way that we handle this is to often flee it, and then often to provide great comfort and strength to each other in the midst of these sort of sorrows. So we've got to stick together. And as you know, and a lot of your viewers will know, that it's at times when we really have been brought to our knees that we seem to show our best as humanity, and I think that's very important. And I think we should lead the way as Christians in that department.
And there can be a sense at this time, you've been through such a hard year that people want to withdraw. But in your view, how important is that connection, being with other people, even when you may not feel like it?
Yeah, I think that's truly true. I mean, there's 150 psalms, and the first psalm talks about, most of life depends on the company that you keep. And so it's very important at times like this to keep company with people, not to withdraw, not to go off on your own. I think that's most important. And it's true. I used to think that was most true of teenage life, but as I've got a little bit older, I've realised that it's important right throughout life to keep really good company, because as the famous philosopher Aristotle said, if you want to be virtuous, well, hang around with virtuous people. And that's very, very important, I think. Yeah.